Going on, everyone? John Matrix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day. We're going to be jumping into more tales of Lord Blackwood, everyone's favorite sea slug. We're going to be checking out the Great Tarasque Hunt of 83 by the Exploring series. This is a requested video by one of my YouTube members, so we're going to jump in and check this out today. Links will be down below in the description to the original video without my commentary and reaction, and to the Exploring series channel. So if you do me a favor, click those links. If you enjoy this video, give it a like. If you enjoy the Exploring series content and are not already subscribed to him, please do me the courtesy of going over there and subscribing to him. He definitely deserves the love. We're doing this live from our YouTube members. As you can see, if you'd like to join in the discussions, we'd love to have you guys come in here and join us. There is a join button down below the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits that I offer. You can get early access to videos up to a week before they're released to the public. You can get priority on any kind of video requests you want me to do for reactions, etc., etc. And obviously come in and chat when we do live reactions. So take a look at those if you have any interest in that. Love to have you guys come in and hang out. But thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day to just come on here and watch the video. There is a tropical storm going around through where I'm at right now. It's calm at the moment, but it could pick up at any moment. So for whatever reason, power goes out, etc., I'll have to pick this up again later for, you know, my YouTube members here. But for you guys watching here at a later date, magic, the magic of editing and cutting, you'll never know what happened. But anyway, let's jump into this video. So again, this is the Exploring series, Lord Blackwood and the Great Tarasque Hunt of 83. Now, I wonder, just a little side note, I wonder if this has anything to do with like a D&D Tarasque. You know, I'm not super familiar with what a Tarasque is in D&D, but I know it's supposed to be like some kind of giant titan, almost impossible to kill creature that's like, you know, super in-game monster that can be thrown out there, and everyone's like, oh my god, it's a Tarasque, kind of a thing, you know? So I'm curious if this is something along those lines. But anyway, let's continue.
Lord Blackwood and the Great Tarasque Hunt of 83. I've already read one tale featuring the great naturalist and explorer turned sea slug, Lord Blackwood, but he's participated in a grand array of adventures throughout his life. The previous tale featured Blackwood entering into the land of the unclean, also known as the alternate dimension of SCP-093.
Which was a very fascinating tale, honestly, and how he, you know, potentially may have found a cure for what was going on, the Blackwood Tears, I believe what it was called, but also that could have been the catalyst that sparked a civil war that could have led to what happened in the future with the SCP tale that we, you know, you find later on with the world decimated. So very interesting, very fascinating.
But this tale stays right here in this dimension. Before I get into the reading, however, I'll give some quick background info on the Tarasque, a creature featured in this tale. The Tarasque was a mythical creature hailing from the region of Provence in southern France.
A three-legged, lion-headed armadillo, or not. I said armadillo, but I meant ankylosaur. Like the word ankylosaur was in my brain when I said armadillo. I don't know what happened. Whatever.
A famous story from the area describes it as a sort of dragon with a lion's head, 6 legs, a scaly tail ending with a stinger, and a body covered in a turtle's shell. It was said to be the offspring of the biblical Leviathan, a great sea serpent. As the story goes, the Tarasque arrived in the region and began devastating the landscape, so a king sent knights and catapults to slay it, but they failed. Instead, Saint Martha of Bethany, a biblical figure, went to the Tarasque and charmed it with hymns and prayers, making it harmless as she led it to the king's city, where the people attacked it. The creature, still charmed, put up no resistance and was killed. Saint Martha proceeded to convert the people of the city to Christianity, and they renamed the city to Tarascon in remembrance of the Tarasque.
Interesting.
Or so the story goes. The tale featured in this video, however, will be quite a bit different. I apologize in advance for my pronunciations of French names and places. May 14th, 1883. I received a most curious missive in the post this morning. It has been 4 months since I returned to England, having nearly lost my life in endeavoring to become the first man to reach the summit of the foreboding and deadly Mount Everest. I have spent the time since in research and recovery here in London, nursing my wounds and documenting my memoirs of the harrowing trip up the mountain and my nearly fatal encounter with the creature I found there. A tale which, I fear, may never be told outside these diaries, and I have not planned to embark again for distant shores until after summer has passed. That has changed, I fear, as the result of today's letter. It was a formal affair, written in a folded card like a wedding invitation, sealed in the finest envelope, and I present it to you below. To Lord Theodore Thomas.
Pretty sure Everest is an SCP, so it's probably a reference. Interesting. I hadn't heard that yet. That would be fascinating. I would assume that would be some kind of massive creature then, like the mountain range or whatever. Interesting.
Thomas Blackwood, CBE. Colonel Joseph d'Enfanté, l'Armée des Terres of the Republic of France, does hereby cordially invite you to participate in a hunt of a great and terrible creature that threatens the lives of thousands. The Tarasque, a creature great and terrifying, of late believed to be legend, has arisen and threatens the security of the land of Provence and of France itself. Colonel d'Enfanté has been authorized by the President of the Republic to pay a sum of 5 million English pounds to the man or men who shall slay this infamous beast. RSVP in care of Colonel d'Enfanté, number 22, Kensington Road, Knightsbridge, London. I immediately dashed off an acceptance and sent it out with the afternoon post.
It makes me wonder why they wouldn't send, like, a small platoon or something like that of, like, actual army, you know, military personnel to, like, deal with something like this, you know, instead of just like, hey, maybe have some hunters that could help lead them and help track them, but actually have, you know, you'd think military personnel would be able to, you know, if it is some kind of monster of legend that is, you know, potentially threatening an entire town, you'd think you'd want to just have more than a handful of, like, you know, hunters, but I don't know. I guess that's just my logic. Maybe they're just trying to keep it on the you know, the down low.
Post. Though I have hunted foxes and elephants and every beast, great and small, in between, I had never heard of such a creature as the Tarasque, and certainly never had an opportunity to hunt one. I spent my afternoon in the study, poring over encyclopedia and tomes of history and mythology, before I found the term in a collection of folk tales regarding Saint Martha, sister to Mary.
He's really actually just looking at the player's handbook in D&D. That's the actual tome he's talking about, and that's where he found the information from.
Magdalene, who had supposedly calmed the beast with her song. The text described it as a vicious creature, a massive chimera that breathed fire and whose scaly hide repelled every blade, that killed without remorse and seemed only to wreak chaos for its own enjoyment. When the last delivery of the day came just before tea time, I had received an address and directions to attend a briefing the day after tomorrow in the city. I have always been a firm believer in the proposition that even in the most preposterous of myths, there lies a kernel of truth. Whether an ancient behemoth that breathed fire was bringing ruination to the south of France, I knew not. But I knew that the army and the president themselves were concerned enough to seek out a man such as myself, and were willing to offer a bounty that would finance a score of proper expeditions for the killing of a single beast. On Wednesday, I will learn why. May 16, 1883. Today I attended Colonel d'Enfanté's meeting, held in a private room in the city, at the club owned by Messrs. Marshall, Carter, and Dark. Lest the reader question my morality, I assure you that I am no member, dues paying or otherwise, of that association.
Interesting that Marshall, I mean, it could just be a reference to them, right? That he's been in there and he's, you know, had a reference to them. But I wonder if, you know, maybe they're getting some gear for them to go hunt this Tarasque.
I find their stock in trade offensive and deplorable, and their clientele even more so. But on this day, the windowless establishment was free of its usual throng of libertines and bohemians, replaced by a handful of officers and men in the uniforms of the French, a handful of our own soldiers guarding the door. Servants and waiters, apparently relieved to be in our company rather than that of their usual employers, offered drinks and hors d'oeuvres to their guests. Besides myself, there were 3 guests of honor at the meeting. There was an American, Mr. Roosevelt, a young man who has made for himself already quite a name as a hunter of big game in the American West. There was Mr. Dukov, a Russian I knew of by reputation as a scientist and historian. Lastly, there was another Englishman, the same Mr. Harris, whom readers of these pages may recall as he whom I matched wits with on the banks of the Nile in 1855. I will spare the reader the excruciating details of our past intercourse. Suffice it to say that Mr. Harris and I were schoolmates at Eton, that I regarded him then as little more than a common blackguard, and that what news I have heard of him since then has given me little reason to change my assessment of his personage.
Such language.
Colonel D'Enfante, a short and middle-aged man who bore signs of great fatigue and worry, spoke briefly and elaborated on his reasons for calling on the 4 of us. The being that his government had come to call the Tarasque, he said, had first appeared the Sunday after Easter, near the village of Tarascon, named, most coincidentally, for the mythical beast itself, and had destroyed the town utterly, claiming several thousand souls in the process. The handful of survivors who escaped the devastation had described a great lizard, nimble and merciless, that had charged directly into the town square and destroyed everyone and everything in its path, crushing, smashing, and devouring people, livestock, and buildings alike.
So far, I'm just picturing basically like a Godzilla kaiju movie with this thing coming in and destroying the town, and now these guys are being hired to come in and hunt it down. Again, I could see, you know, an interesting monster movie being made from this.
One man, a farmer whose wife and children had been ripped to shreds by the beast, claimed that it spoke to him in plain French, and told him of them, ils étaient répugnants. Since then, the colonel said, 3 outlying villages and countless farms in Provence had fallen to the Tarasque.
I wonder what would have triggered it to like either awaken or cause it to come on land and start destroying these things, right? Because this is supposed to be like mythologically the offspring of, you know, a sea creature. So I would assume it's amphibious. Maybe it lives in the sea. It comes on shore for some, you know, periods of time. But I wonder what would have triggered it to, you know, awaken and go on this rampage.
It attacked without mercy or reason, killed indiscriminately.
And it says it spoke French to them. So obviously it's an intelligent creature and it understands, you know, at least a human language.
And left only devastation in its wake. The army had sent men and horses and cavalry against it. There were few survivors, and those who lived claimed the beast had been struck directly by artillery, and neither flagged nor missed a step.
Okay, well then that answers my question. So they actually did have military action against it and was ineffectual.
The hole in its chest seemingly knitting together as it charged their position. The entire region had been quarantined.
Subscene SCP, that is about the beast of Givaudan. I don't know what that is. I mean, yeah, it could be.
Citizens were being evacuated by the thousands, and the army and the press were passing stories of plagues and Prussian revanchists, but his government feared the worst would soon come to pass. Nîmes, Avignon, and Arles were in danger if the beast continued to rage. The 4 of us, the colonel claimed, were the finest hunters and scientific minds available and known to his government. He knew not if we were capable of taking down such a monster, but between our expert knowledge and unique access to the finest tools and weapons known to science, he hoped we could succeed where his own forces had failed.
I mean, yeah, if artillery had been doing something,
I
you
left
gotta
the
think
meeting
outside
with a
the
stack
box.
of papers, details of the army's knowledge.
Like, I would wonder if, like, some kind of poison would work, if you could, like, leave some kind of, like, food out for it that's poisoned, and, you know, see if that would be effectual. I don't know.
Knowledge of the Tarasque based on what reconnaissance they have to date endeavored. On Saturday, the four of us will board a steamer across the channel and travel to the epicenter of this pandemonium ourselves. Deeds, my loyal valet, has begun packing my bags.
Deeds!
And is having the more
Deeds.
exotic armaments in my arsenal prepared for shipping. I do not anticipate working with Mr. Harris any more than I anticipate shaking hands with the devil. But Messrs. Roosevelt and Dukov appear to be of sound mind and
he really doesn't like Harris, huh?
fine spirit. And with luck, our motley quartet shall return to England with a fortune in our pockets and a story to tell.
Oh, interesting.
May 20th, 1883. We disembarked in Avignon after an uneventful trip by train from Calais. It may seem strange for a globetrotter such as myself, but until this weekend I have never had occasion to travel to France. After all, it is a civilized place, lacking in the ancient mysteries and elusive game that is my passion, or so I would have thought. Mr. Roosevelt and I spent many hours sharing our tales of adventure. I find in him a true intellectual who understands what it means to be a naturalist. Mr. Dukov I find more difficult to talk to. He is a private man who prefers the company of his books and his studies to that of his fellows. He proudly displayed a variety of his own inventions he intended to test against the Tarasque. A gun that fires beams of electricity, a jellied kerosene that burns without exploding,
napalm,
and what he described as his latest prototype, a large rifle on a tripod, fueled by refined pitchblende, which I suspect is not entirely different than Mr. Moth's destabilizing muskets, one of which I had brought myself. I did my best to avoid speaking to Mr. Harris during the trip. I intend during our expedition to be no less than a gentleman,
okay. I'll
but the
check
man
that
leaves
out.
a sour taste in my mouth. When we boarded the train at Calais, I watched as he had a large crate loaded onto the train, which he told us contained his secret weapon. He refused to tell us what the box contained, but viewing it made me uncomfortable.
The nuke.
The air seemed to chill as it was carried by. In any event, it is too large to fit in our wagon. For now, we shall be leaving it in a bank vault in Avignon. Our weapons and provisions have been loaded onto a wagon, and horses have been readied for us. Tomorrow, Colonel D'Enfonte will escort us to the edge of the quarantine zone. From there, he says, the four of us shall be on our own. He can spare no more soldiers, lest the beast attack the fortifications directly and break loose. May 21st, 1883. I have seen the horrors of war often enough in my years. I saw the wrath of the British Empire firsthand when I led troops in the Opium Wars. In Africa, I have seen native tribes fight to the last man, destroying everything in their path. In the Crimea, I barely escaped with my life as thousands of men fought and died and cities were laid bare. The destruction I saw there pales in comparison to what I have beheld in the Tarasque's wake. Avignon itself looked like a city at war, soldiers patrolling the streets, barricades at the edge of town. Not far outside the city, we reached the edge of the quarantine zone. Soldiers had been hard at work digging trenches, erecting fortifications. The young men keeping watch looked battle-scarred, as though they had seen indescribable horror. A constant stream of evacuees made their way out of the area, women and children, some with little more than the clothes on their back. Many looked confused and agitated, as if they had no clue why they were being removed from their homes. On the faces of others, there was no doubt. I asked on passing if any of them had yet seen the Tarasque. Only a few, the scouts and lookouts, had seen it from a distance, I was told, for nobody who had engaged the beast at close range was still alive. It had not yet dared to attack the perimeter the army had erected, but 2 days prior, a watchman told me, he had spotted it a mile from the front line, seemingly.
So, it hasn't attacked any of their fortifications directly. And it seems like, it almost seems like it's doing kind of like hit and run tactics, where it's just, you know, engaging in fights that it think it can win in smaller groups, against smaller groups, and then, yeah, backing off before they can fully group up and try to overwhelm it. Huh.
Staring back at him. Mr. Harris grudgingly agreed to ride out alone and scout for the beast, while Mr. Roosevelt, Mr. Dukov, and I followed the road to Tarasque to learn what we could of the nature of our quarry. Tarasque itself was a scene of utter ruination. Bodies lay by the score in the streets where they had fallen. Much of the town had been consumed by fire. The town's famous castle and other stone buildings dashed to rubble, and massive holes torn in the walls that remained standing.
Again, it just makes me wonder what would have happened to, like, trigger this. Could they have, like, you know, the town was, like, named after it? Because could this have been, like, it's, like, you know, breeding ground of some sort? Was there, like, a baby one somewhere, and people killed it, so it went berserk? You know, something like, because it sounds like this town had been there for a long period of time, and so something would have had to have, like, set this creature off, right? So,
We saw not a living soul. No man or woman, no livestock, nor vermin, nor birds
Damn.
or beasts of the field. Even the greenery of the town seemed to have been destroyed.
and it's not even, it's not leaving anything alive, not even, like, other animals in the area. So it seems like it's enraged by something, or it's just rabid.
I feel pangs of doubt in my stomach as we surveyed the scene.
But I mean, if it's rabid, you'd think it would just blindly, like, go and attack things. You know what I'm saying? Like, it wouldn't be. It's from the description that they're saying it has some kind of intelligence and is attacking at least thoughtfully, and is not allowing itself to potentially be, I guess, overwhelmed. Because it's not a direct attacking their fortifications directly, etc., etc. So I don't know.
Scene. Could one creature have truly wreaked such destruction? We set up camp on the edge of the dead town. Mr. Harris returned by evening and informed us he had spotted the Tarasque to the southwest, near the village of Bellegarde, in the act of destroying a farmhouse. Its route, he said, had not been difficult to trace.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the same creature, but we have to infer that for now, that's what it is.
For a swath of barren land seemed to lay a trail. Even the grass itself was not safe from the Tarasque's wrath. Tomorrow, we will follow the trail and engage the beast. May 22nd, 1883.
There's the D&D Tarasque.
We have met the Tarasque this day, and we are lucky to have escaped with our lives. We traveled southwest to Belleville, which we found in a state of destruction not unlike that of Tarasque itself. From there, we followed the creature's trail as it meandered south, then west, then northwest through the farmlands, drawing uncomfortably close to Nîmes. It's not safe from the Tarasque's wrath. Tomorrow, we will follow the trail and engage the beast.
Let's say it went south and west and northwest. So is this like carving out like an area?
May 22nd, 1883. We have met the Tarasque this day, and we are lucky to have escaped with our lives. We traveled southwest to Belleville, which we found in a state of destruction not unlike that of Tarasque itself. From there, we followed the creature's trail as it meandered south, then west, then northwest through the farmlands, drawing uncomfortably close to Nîmes. Shortly after midday, we spotted the creature in the distance. It was stationary, seeming to nap in the afternoon sun. It was a massive thing, longer than a whale and taller than a giraffe, and it looked to outweigh either. Its scales glistened in the sun, and its teeth, massive and shining, were bared as it rested among the chaos it had wrought. Had it wings?
You know, for those Godzilla kaiju fans out there, I can't help picture and Anguirus. That's what I'm seeing this thing as.
I would have called it a dragon. With our weapons in tow, we stealthily approached the beast to a range of less than 100 feet. Mr. Dukov set up his pitch-blende gun, which he claimed would take some time to charge before it could be fired.
That sounds like
Mr. Roosevelt and Mr. Harris prepared their elephant guns and I readied my particle destabilizer. Behind a short fence demarcating one of the now abandoned farms, we drew straws, and it was agreed I would take the first shot at the abomination. Steadying my gun against the fence, I took careful aim for the sleeping Tarasque's head. I held my breath, made my final adjustment, and fired. The shot hit square and true, and we watched with delight as the top of the Tarasque's head was shorn clean off. The beast slumped to the ground, and I breathed a sigh of relief. In one shot, the beast that had killed thousands and menaced a nation was dead.
Or
Mr. Harris let out a cheer, and the dead beast came to life. It rose to its feet and turned in our direction. Blood, brains, and gore oozed from its skull as a head missing an eye stared us down and let out a blood-curdling roar before it charged at us faster than a bull elephant. Mr. Roosevelt and Mr. Harris barely had time to fire a round each at the beast before we were forced to scatter. Harris tossed aside his elephant gun for a smaller repeater he had been carrying and discharged a magazine into the Tarasque's flank, and we watched in horror as the wounds it took sealed themselves within seconds.
Jesus.
Mr. Dukov was forced to shut down his pitch-blende gun before it could fully charge, and fired his electric rifle 3 times into...
Yeah, I feel like you should have waited until his gun was ready before you enacted this plan. Like, it was sleeping, you had time, you pissed it off before you guys were fully ready. Just saying, bad idea.
Into the monster's open wound, stunning it for long enough for us to reach our horses. By the time we were on horseback, the beast was up again and charging us. Flesh and bone was knitting anew over the open cavity.
I feel like you're not going to outrun it on horseback.
I fired the particle destabilizer again at its foreleg and took it off entirely, hobbling it as it tried to chase us on 3 legs. We rode in 4 directions and agreed to meet behind the quarantine line. I saw the beast attempt to take off in pursuit of Mr. Roosevelt
that's a hell of a
as the
picture.
stump of its leg began to grow and take new form, but he was able to elude the Goliath, and by nightfall, we were among the soldiers at the barricade, our prides injured, but otherwise in good health.
So what are they going to do to be able to actually kill it? Because it took off half of its head. Its brains and shit were all spilling out, and it just regenerated. Like, it's like Wolverine here. Like, what are you going to do?
Mate,
This is one of these things where you're just going to have to, like, nuke it somehow and, like, vaporize it, you know, even though, I mean, it's the 1800s. Technically, they don't have that kind of technology yet, but SCP, so who knows what they actually have access to.
28th, 1883. Luck and providence have provided. Thus far, the Tarasque has made no effort to escape the quarantine area, and has proven content to ravage the abandoned farms of Provence and feed liberally on the animals and plants left behind. After our second attempt to attack the Tarasque on the 23rd proved no more successful than the first, we have come to a conclusion that the beast cannot be killed simply by gunshot,
No shit.
or electrification, or setting it aflame, for the rate at which it heals its injuries is so great, and its tolerance for pain and mutilation so high, that even the mighty broadsides of the Royal Navy would have little chance of destroying it before it could take their lives in trade.
True.
To slay the Tarasque, we determined, we would have to immobilize it, and deal such destruction upon it that it would be utterly annihilated before it could free itself.
Yeah. Do enough damage to it before its healing factor could actually take hold. I wonder if this creature has some kind of, like, specialized organ that would be, like, in charge of essentially its healing regeneration, and if you could, like, destroy that organ, you could keep it from regenerating. I don't know.
We discussed for several hours how such a thing could be achieved, before an old sergeant who had been manning the night watch begged our ears. The sergeant had, he said, fought in Vietnam when the natives there attempted to rebel against the French in '68, and had seen them make use of a trap that was elegant, easily disguised, and deadly.
What? This is 1883, right? This is what the time is. It's supposed to be 1883. They're talking about Vietnam happening in the 1800s. Am I confused on what's going on with the timeline here?
Deadly. Mr. Roosevelt and I talked over the fine points of the idea well into the night, and the next day the four of us traveled into the field to lay our trap. We prepared our trap in the fields near Graveson, a village between Tarasque and Avignon that the Tarasque had yet to lay waste to, and where the water table was amenable to our task. By careful...
I mean, yeah. But the way he's talking about it was like, you know, Vietnam and our actual timeline in you know, the 60s and whatnot.
Observation, we had judged that the beast stood about 9 feet at the shoulder, 6 feet wide, and 30 feet long. With the help of a few soldiers, whom Colonel D'Enfante had grudgingly conceded to parting with, we dug a long trench in the field, wide and long enough to contain the beast, and deep enough to stop the beast climbing loose before the damage could be done. In the bottom of the pit, we mounted steel rods, sharpened to a fine point, by the hundreds, each tipped with a noxious poison I had acquired in the Orient. Running lengthwise through the center of the pit, we built a wooden bridge, large and sturdy enough to accommodate a man on horseback, but not so sturdy that it would not break and shatter under the weight of the
they're basically
Tarasque.
making a pitfall for it.
4 days we were involved in the earthwork. The digging done, we laid a net across the top, and it was covered with grass and leaves. From a distance, it looked to all the world like an ordinary patch of open land, beneath which lay doom. Mr. Harris has spotted the Tarasque not 2 miles from our location, and tomorrow we will spring the trap. Mr. Roosevelt has agreed to act as bait. He will approach the Tarasque on horseback and attack it once with his elephant gun, and once it gives chase, he will lure it to the pit. He is to gallop across the bridge and lure the Tarasque to follow him, and when it attempts to do so, it will surely fall into the pit. Messrs. Dukov and Harris and I, lying in wait out of sight, will then join Mr. Roosevelt at the pit's edge and unleash the full fury of our armaments onto it.
So they're essentially, what it sounds like, I guess, they're creating a pitfall for it, and then they're going to have the army spring up and just have everyone just hit it with everything they got, I guess.
Our rifles and shotguns, the particle destabilizer, Mr. Dukov's electric rifle, and provided it has charged safely, he shall make his first firing of the pitch-blende gun. Once our armament has been exhausted, we shall pour 4 barrels of Mr. Dukov's jellied kerosene into the pit and ignite it. And, Providence withstanding, nothing shall be left of the creature but ash and bone by sundown tomorrow.
I mean, I feel like they're still going to need more firepower, right? I mean, I guess it depends on what that guy's, you know, pitch blend gun can actually do. But it feels like with just the 4 of them, they still aren't going to be able to do enough damage to this thing. Yeah, hit him with the Vietnam special, throw a little Agent Orange on top of him, you know what I'm saying?
May 29th, 1883.
That is terrifying.
Success. The plan went off without a hitch. It was afternoon before Mr. Roosevelt could coerce the Tarasque into pursuing him. But surely enough, the reptilian behemoth fell into the pit, impaled upon the spikes, and was stuck while the 4 of us rained destruction from above. The monster let loose a screech from the pits of damnation itself as bullets and explosives tore its flesh loose bit by bit.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is what we're talking about. It's just napalm, essentially.
And jellied kerosene burned slowly and stopped it regrowing. Mr. Dukov warned us to avert our eyes when he finally fired the pitch-blende gun, and his warning was justified. The blast was bright enough to blind, and a massive plume of smoke and fire erupted from the pit after he had pulled the trigger, seeming to blossom into a mushroom above us.
He essentially had a nuke rifle.
By the time the fires had...
Are we in Fallout now? We got little, like, you know, little mini nuke launchers?
Died down, a charred skeleton was all that remained. We have separated the beast's massive skull, blackened and perforated, from what remains of the monster, and a handful of soldiers who reported after the blast are hard at work filling in the pit with earth. Tomorrow, we shall bring the skull back to Avignon and collect our reward.
I feel like it's not dead yet. I feel like it's gonna pull Wolverine, and like from like a single little cell, it's gonna regrow.
May 30th, 1883. Disaster. We were hailed as heroes by the army when we arrived in Avignon with our prize. In the morning light, the Tarasque skull seemed whiter than it had the night before, and more charred flesh stuck to it than it had seemed when we dragged it from the pit, though surely it was little more than an illusion. The four of us posed for photographs, and Mr. Dukov asked to have his photograph taken with his head in between the massive jaws of our fallen prey.
Nope. Bad idea.
Imagine our horror when the jaws snapped shut, severing Dukov's head neatly at the shoulders. The skull of the Tarasque rolled loose from its place on the stage and snapped again, taking another chunk of his body, and the soldier screamed and fainted as it seemed to be growing a new coating of flesh and scales over its charred exterior. We watched, shocked, as the honor guards fired a volley at the skull. The chips it took off seemed to replace themselves instantly, and I was dumbfounded as sinew and muscle seemed to spread across the creature's bones and knit into shape. The jaws of the disembodied Tarasque opened, and it shouted in French, "Vous me rendez malade." From the other end of the plaza I heard more screams, and looked to see the impossible. The rest of the Tarasque, covered in earth and grime, held together by a few lonely strands of muscle.
What the fuck?
The headless carcass lurched through the square with uncanny speed.
How are you supposed to kill this thing then? Like, its other half is coming to it to, like, reconnect? Like, what?
Trampling men in its path, ignoring gunshot and cannon fire as it made to rejoin its body. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mr. Harris take off running. Mr. Roosevelt...
It's literally like Godzilla. It's literally like a kaiju from a Godzilla movie. You just, like, you think it's dead and it's just gonna come back.
Noted he was headed in the direction of the bank vault and his secret weapon. As the skull of the Tarasque seemed to be making its way towards where I stood, I gave Harris chase. We found Mr. Harris having dragged the crate out of the vault into the lobby, hurriedly prying the boards loose. Soon the crate fell away, revealing a stone coffin that looked truly ancient. It felt as if all the heat fled the room when the sarcophagus was exposed.
Is he gonna, like, release some kind of mummy?
I forced back a shudder as I beheld it.
Is this man gonna bring a Necron out? Like, what is happening?
3 chains with massive locks held the lid in place, and the lid and casket itself were covered with hand-carved runes that looked to be Sumerian or Akkadian. I confess that I have not taken the time to learn the ancient languages of Mesopotamia, but I felt a distinct sense of wrongness emanating from the box.
Yeah,
as Mr.
I legit feel like he's about to, like, throw out a vampire or something and let the vampire go, like, do, I don't know what's gonna happen.
Harris drew a ring with 3 keys from his coat and began to unlock the seals, one by one. I begged with him to stop this madness and flee while we had a chance, and he insisted that once open, our victory would be secured. Mr. Harris pushed the lid aside and barely had a moment to regard his secret weapon in the flesh before an olive-toned arm, sword in hand, lashed out from within the box and sliced his head clean off.
Yikes.
In all my years of adventuring among the primitives and wild men of the world, I have never set eyes on a man who looked so savage, so elemental, so full of primal rage as the being that now climbed from the coffin, naked, sword in hand, its long black hair flowing behind it, its body covered head to toe in tattoos of eldritch imagery and ancient languages that resembled...
It's Sephiroth. I know it.
No script written by man. Sherman, the American general, is said to have told his enemies, begging for mercy, that they may as well appeal against the thunderstorm. What I beheld before me, I thought, was the very eidolon of the storm. Mr. Roosevelt attempted to entreat with the man and beg its assistance. Seeming to barely hear him, the God-man set his eyes on Roosevelt and lunged with his sword. Roosevelt parried with his rifle, the barrel cracking under its onslaught, and in surprise, the God-man dropped the blade. Roosevelt picked it up and attempted to return the blow, and in an instant, the God-man somehow held another sword in each hand. Mr. Roosevelt did his best to fend off his assailant's onslaught, but found himself cornered soon. Though I am loath to intervene in a fair fight between 2 honest men, I could not bear to see Mr. Roosevelt cut down in the midst of this pandemonium.
Oh shit!
I drew my pistol and emptied its cylinder, discharging 5 rounds into the God-man's head. Though it
I love how he's calling him the God Man.
should have been dead, the olive-skinned destroyer turned and stared me down. Like the Tarasque, even with half its face gone, it seemed ready to kill. Dropping one of its blades, it moved its hand rapidly through the air and tossed something at me faster than I could react. In an instant, I could not move my arms. The man had somehow materialized a bola, a weapon used by the cowmen of South America to immobilize fleeing animals, and it had tied itself securely around my chest. Another flick, and a second bola struck me around the legs, and I was down on the ground. He approached to land the killing blow, when behind me I saw the outer wall of the bank shudder and give way, and heard that offensive roar.
It's true.
The cry of the Tarasque, nary a scratch upon it, as it entered the building in search of its would-be slayers. The God-man caught sight of the Tarasque and lost interest entirely in Mr. Roosevelt and I. This...
So then the question is, it's like, okay, you release him to kill the Tarasque, then he kills the Tarasque. Now you have a bigger problem on your hands. How are you going to reseal this dude?
I thought must be why poor Mr. Harris considered him his secret weapon. This avatar of rage lived to fight, and in the Tarasque it had the ultimate rival. To describe the...
It's literally Doom Guy. Abel is literally just Doom Guy. Just too angry to die.
The fight that ensued between those two unkillable titans would take 100 pages or more. Mr. Roosevelt and I huddled in the safety of the bank vault, which alone seemed immune to the destruction the two rained upon each other. After the better part of an hour had passed, hundreds lay dead around them, the center of Avignon little more than rubble.
Yeah, damn.
The God-man was missing an arm and half a leg, an eye, and the better part of his brain, and his stomach had been cut open. In a state where most men would be long dead, it continued to fight, severing even its own entrails and making weapons of them.
The fuck?
The Tarasque had suffered as badly. It was on the ground, recuperating, when I saw the God-man take notice of Mr. Dukov's pitch-blende gun, lying near what remained of the stage that an hour ago had been the site of such jubilation. As we watched, the God-man removed the core of the pitch-blende gun with an uncanny precision. He made what seemed to be bombs and explosives appear, and it strapped them to the device's core, which he mounted on his chest. Lighting a fuse, it charged at the Tarasque as it readied itself to meet him. Having seen the fury of the pitch-blende gun in a controlled state, Mr. Roosevelt and I had no desire to see what happened next.
Yep.
We retreated into the vault as a blinding light filled the square, and a blistering wind, mightier than the hurricanes of the Caribbean, slammed the door shut and sealed us within. It is dark. The light from my electric torch has provided just enough luminescence by which to write this account. I know not for how long the air in this vault will last. Aside from the lifeless body of Mr. Harris, there's nothing in this vault that approximates food or water. And as Christians and gentlemen, Mr. Roosevelt and myself have sworn not to pursue that dark path.
Yeah.
Unless our lives themselves are on the line.
Interesting. At the start of this video, I would not have had Abel nuking the Tarasque as the end of this story, and or even them two like fighting in some kind of Titanic Clash of the Titans kind of, you know, battle. But I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Again, would be a sick movie. I would watch this.
I do not know if I will make it out of here alive. If I do not, let this diary be my last word and testament to the horrors that have befallen this corner of the world. June 13th, 1883. Providence smiled upon us after all, in the end. On the morning of the 1st, the vault door opened, and I regarded a major of the army and a company of men searching for survivors. Mr. Roosevelt and I were dehydrated and beginning to suffer from pitch-blende fever. Fortunately, I knew the address of one of my dear friend Henry's associates in Marseille, and upon being transported to hospital, he met us there and provided the treatments necessary to stave off the certain death that malicious ague carries with it. Colonel D'Enfontaine is dead, I have learned, and at least 10,000 others who were incinerated when Avignon was consumed by...
Yeah, I was gonna say. I think a lot more people are probably dead than that after a fucking little mini nuke goes off and destroys the town.
Flame. Even those who had survived, I learned, have been burned or blinded, and pitch-blende fever will likely claim many of them in time. No sign has been seen of the Tarasque or the God-Man since the explosion, nor, for that matter, of the icy sarcophagus in which he had apparently slept until the late Mr. Harris loosed him upon the city. It will take years, if not decades, to restore this ancient region to its...
And yeah, that's a pretty good question. Like, where did Harris... I would assume he must have got them from Marshall Carter and Dark, right? Like, where else would he buy, I guess, get that from? And the fact that they referenced Marshall Carter and Dark earlier in the story kind of would lead to that conclusion, I guess. But I guess you could infer that he could have got it from any kind of whatever. If he's, you know, into the anomalous, who knows where he actually got it from. And if he's an adventurer, maybe he found the tomb somewhere in one of his adventures and, you know, figured out what it was, but kept them locked up. You know, who knows?
Its former glory. We were two of only a handful of witnesses to one of the greatest disasters to strike France in recent memory. And having been at the center of it all, the army regarded us with great suspicion. We were interrogated several times, first by soldiers, then by police, then by politicians. A man who looked English watched and took notes, but said not a word as we told our story. In the end, we escaped transportation to Devil's Island, but the reward that had been promised was forfeit, and we were sternly warned that neither of us were welcome in France again.
I mean, technically they didn't do it, but y'all nuked the city. So, yeah.
So long as we lived. The explosion that claimed Avignon was seen for hundreds of miles, I learned, and the press from Paris to New York were heavily embroiled in speculation. Everything from a falling star, to a German superweapon, to the wrath of God himself was being proposed as an explanation.
I mean, technically, the wrath of God, technically, isn't, you know, wrong.
We were warned not to share our personal knowledge of the event with others, as we were sent on our way. Mr. Roosevelt and I parted ways in Calais. He intends to return to America, he informed me, and pursue a political career. In that, I wish him well. I returned to my house in London this afternoon, and was informed by Deeds that a postcard had arrived for me this morning.
Deeds better have all kinds of tea and scones ready for me if I'm Mr. Blackwood when I get home. After dealing with that shit and being stuck in a vault for a few days to the point of dehydration, I want some scones, I want some tea, and I want to sit and relax and chill the fuck out for a little bit. Know what I'm saying?
The handwriting in the brief, unsigned note within resembled that of the strange Englishman who had attended the questionings.
Yeah, it's Theodore Roosevelt. Yeah. And, you know, obviously the reference that he's going to pursue political, you know, means obviously becomes the president of our country.
Unsigned note within resembled that of the strange Englishman who had attended the questionings, whose notes I caught brief glimpses of from time to time. I present that message below. To Lord Theodore Thomas Blackwood, CBE. The Royal Foundation for the Security, Containment, and Protection of Anomalous Objects and Phantasmagoria requests a meeting for the purpose of negotiating an alliance favorable to both our parties.
Oh shit.
Please call any time, excepting Sundays, at number 19, Marylebone Road, Westminster, and ask to speak to Dr. Thursday. Your discretion is requested in this matter.
Talk to Dr. Thursday, but not on a Sunday. Huh?
I have not heard of this foundation before, and I do not know if I intend to take them up on their mysterious overture. Perhaps I shall hear them out, but I have never been one to serve in one man's employ for very long, and I value my freedom as a naturalist and explorer above all else. We shall see.
We shall see. Okay. All right. So in the next tale, maybe we'll hear of the meeting between the Lord Blackwood and the SCP. Let's see if we get any quote here. No quote. God damn it. God damn it. All right. Well, that was an interesting tale. Lord Blackwood in the Great Tarasque Hunt of 83 by the Exploring series. Links as always down below in the description to the original channel and video without my commentary and reaction. Please do me a favor, click on those links, give the video a like. And if you're not subbed to the Exploring series, go over there and give him a sub if you enjoy his content. Very interesting, honestly, story and tale. It definitely took some twists that I wasn't expecting, I should say. The whole Abel thing, I figured there'd be some other kind of SCP in the box, but I wasn't expecting it to be Abel. I didn't know really what else it could have been. I figured it might be some other kind of kaiju-esque monster, and there would be some kind of, you know, kaiju battle that would happen at the end, but I didn't expect it to be, you know, Abel going on here. For the record, the French phrase that Trask spoke to you are disgusting or something close to that, so it's heavily implied that Trask really another famous SCP lizard. Oh yeah, so it's 682. Interesting. Though he said that in the video, that's why I didn't say it yet. So yeah, the Tarasque is just the extremely hard to kill lizard. Which, I mean, it would make sense. It would make sense. It's an interesting idea and tale of the various twists. And then obviously from this could be where the SCP gains access to and containment of 682 and Abel. Could be an interesting tale on how the SCP gained access to them and containing them. But yeah, I like it. So far I've really enjoyed all of the Blackwood tales. The Land of the Unclean was very fascinating and interesting idea and twist on that whole world and lore, and this, you know, is an interesting kind of potential origin story on how the SCP Foundation got containment of 682 and Abel to begin with. So yeah, I didn't really, I was wondering, the big thing was what was in the box. What's in the fucking box? I assumed it would be some other kind of kaiju or some other kind of SCP that would end up fighting it, but I didn't have it as Abel. It was definitely not something that I had thought of, so very interesting. But you can't say Kelch is that the indestructible reptile has the head of a lion. Yes, it could be. But that's gonna do it for this one, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. We're doing this reaction live for YouTube members, as you can see. We'd love to have you guys come in and hang out and join our discussions as we watch these live. If you'd like to do so, or check out any other benefits that I offer, there's a join button down below the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership benefits. You can get you know, early access videos up to a week before they're released to the public, priority in any kind of you know, reaction requests you have me do, etc., etc. So take a look at those, see if you have any interest, and if you decide you want to take your support to the next level, we'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to come hang out and watch this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider leaving a like and a sub, because it helps me and helps the channel grow. And yeah, hope you guys are having yourselves a wonderful day. Talk to you later.